If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniak. This incident happened when I was 6 or 7, so I wasn't scared at the time because I didn't really understand what was happening. My dad lived in Thailand for around 5 years with my stepmom, and I went to stay with them for a week or two, and we decided to stay in a different part of the country than they lived in. I don't remember exactly where we were, but we were staying in this beach bungalow hotel place in a non-tourist area, and we were only there for a few hours before this incident happened, but I do not remember seeing a single person at the hotel. The restaurant was empty, the beach bar was empty, and the place was just deserted besides the people who worked in there. Our bungalow/room was about a meter off the ground and pretty simple, with a bathroom, double bed and a single. There was a pretty decent TV opposite the bed with a lot of spaces in between. Also, we didn't know until later that the lock on our sliding glass door was broken. It got dark and we watched some bug documentaries and went to sleep. About 2 hours later, my dad woke me up and told me that he had woken up and saw a man who had come into our room, standing in the dark staring at my dad, watching him sleep. My dad was a pretty calm person, telling the man this isn't his room and that he needs to leave. But he didn't. So my dad got out of his bed and walked up to the man to kick him out, at which point he walked out the door and my dad woke me up. We stood on the balcony looking down the long narrow path to our bungalow, but this man is nowhere to be seen. About half an hour later, everyone's asleep but me. I was about to drift off when I saw a hand through the glass door turning the light on. We got up and looked around, but once again, there's no sign of anyone. The exact same thing happened 15 minutes later. We jammed the door shut with something and heard a man fiddling with the lock 10 minutes later. We call reception and they check the place out but can't find anything, and they said to let them know if anything else happens. It was probably an hour later. Everyone's asleep but me, and I saw this man unjam the door, crawl on the floor to our bathroom like some sort of demonic creature, turn the bathroom light on, staring at me, smiling. This woke my parents up and we all ran out of there to report it to reception but can't find anyone at all. They then move us to a special room above the reception and we left first thing in the morning. I was too young to understand what was happening at the time, but looking back on it, it gives me chills. I'm quite a loner and like to go on walks just to get some me time. This one night on the 27th of November, I decided to go on another lengthy walk of mine. This one night is on the 27th of November, and I decided to go on yet another lengthy walk. There was something eerie this time though, as I had that feeling something grotesque was about to happen. So at around 2 AM, I was restless and made my way into the cool night with that same feeling of dread that I had earlier. I finished the first hour of my walk pretty normal, with nothing out of the ordinary happening, but lo and behold, I had a feeling I was being watched, bearing in mind it was about 3 AM now, and I was sitting on a bench that was in a park that wasn't very well lit. Now someone else being in that park at that time is very unlikely. as it's a small town, and the only people who'd be around at this time are drunk idiots. Anyway, there's no sound coming from the dark figure that caught my eye. He was just standing in my direction, staring. I looked down at my phone and put my torchlight on, pointing my phone towards where the figure was. But to my surprise, he's vanished. Me just being paranoid and extremely tired, I just ignored the weird encounter and decided it would be best to make my way home and get some shut-eye. Placing my phone back in my pocket, lighting up another cigarette, I made my way back to my home, but still had a pretty uneasy feeling of being watched. I'm normally not so easily scared, but this feels different, like somebody had decided to taunt me. I look behind me, seeing the same dark figure standing right beside a tree, looking my way. I'm very scared now and put off. I shout out, "Hey man, is there a problem?" You can hear the fear in my voice, but I wasn't gonna let this creep get the best of me. No response from him. Things are getting weird now. I sit there and my eyes widen. This man got on the floor and starts crawling towards me in a manner I can only describe as insane. The only thing I can hear is this hissing sound. Okay, that's really weird. This is such a crazy situation to be in. I just stood there wondering what on earth was gonna happen to me, but in my current state of fear, I'm not thinking straight. He edges closer and I vaguely noticed that something was dangling from his rucksack. I guessed it's sort of a bird or small creature. Anyway, I didn't hang around to find out, so I dashed off a small lane with him seemingly right behind me. I get inside and slam the door shut, but he's nowhere to be seen out the windows. Looking back on the ordeal, maybe I shouldn't have headed straight home because now he knows where I live. But who would have thought right in that situation? I literally ran through my gate to my front door, glancing behind me. One thing the man said to me from in the darkness will always send chills down my spine. Through the window I heard him mutter, "One day we'll meet again, and this time you'll be coming home with me." The events of this night stopped me from being on walks because I still, even to this day 5 years on, fear that he'll come back to do something far more sinister this time. I pray to God he doesn't. I've always had an innate fear of the night, not so much the dark, but the night itself. As a child, my imagination was overcome with stories of creatures that come alive at night, and the safety offered by a house and light. I never had anything to base this fear upon, until a night when I decided to go with a buddy of mine to a baseball game and got stuck at a light at 2 AM. after dropping him off at home. Of course, that night the game went into extra innings, so we didn't have a chance to drop my friend off until well after 1 AM. Everything is fine on the way home, until I hit a light right before the street that led to my house. It's a T-junction, and I was turning left. The light is one of those you think is broken until it turns on fully green, when you decide to run it. Of course, I pulled right as the light turned red. I would have just ran the light, seeing as no one else was there, and it's now getting close to 2 AM. On a school night, but earlier that week I heard the phrase, "Character is what you do when no one's looking." For whatever reason, that was the night I decided to prove to myself that I'm a man of character. Big mistake. I was pulled to a stop at the light, feeling good about myself, bordering on self-righteousness, when I happened to look out my window to the left and notice a lady sitting all alone on a bus bench. We make eye contact briefly, and I quickly look away. It was so late, I could see movement out of my peripheral vision, and knew she's coming my way. I looked out of the window and noticed she's carrying a bag. I quickly check that my doors are locked and all the windows are up. I then moved my right foot above the accelerator just in case, bracing myself for what was to come. I was hoping that there would just be an awkward exchange and was praying for a quick light change before she reaches me, so I could just get out of there. I knew there was a slim chance of that. She walks right up to my window, puts her bag down, and began tapping on my window. I nervously look at her. She then motions to me to take the window down. I had automatic windows, so I just imagined pushing too hard on the window button and that thing come all the way down. So I took a deep breath, lightly flickering it. The window moves microscopically down. She didn't notice or care. Leaning in to talk, she then said my boyfriend beat me up. I have a friend who lives down the street, can you give me a ride? I thought, should I stop and give a brief description of the lady? I probably should. She was small, skinny, at an intermediate age. She was either mid-20s or had a hard 20 years on the streets, or she was legitimately 60-something, having a moderate hard life. All that to say, just by looking at her, there was no way to verify her story. She appeared beat up by life, not just by her boyfriend. But there was something about her delivery. It's robotic and seemed practiced, like there was a disconnect from what she was saying. This made my skin crawl. After a brief, about second debate on what I should do, I told her I had to get home and I couldn't offer a ride. After my first refusal, she leaned in closer and said the same thing again. My boyfriend beat me up. I live down the street, can you give me a ride? This is the first time I felt more confident when I declined the offer. I told her I had a curfew to get home. She leans in, repeating the statement. At this point the light changed. I slowly lift my foot off the brake and start rolling forward and began muttering an apology. She didn't move. She looked to the light at that moment, looking down at me, leaned in closer and said, "You made the right decision." She then picks her bag up and walks back towards the bench. I peel out of the intersection, screaming and crying the whole way home. I have no idea what she planned to do or what's in her bag, or if there were people waiting to jump my car from the bushes I'd moved to let her in. But that one encounter has honestly changed me forever. This occurred in the early 1920s with my great-grandma Lily. My grandma and my mum have shared this story on occasion, and why black labs are now a preferred breed for our family. This is my first post too. She and my great-grandpa George had recently married, purchasing a nice house in the neighbourhood. My grandpa worked as a post officer, while my grandma Lily worked as a secretary. There were days Lily was home alone, so my granddad purchased a black lab as a pet to keep the house safe. A little information about my great-grandma: she was disabled and would walk around using a stool for balance, much like people use walkers. When she was a child, she slipped and fell in a porcelain tub, breaking her hip and pelvis. She is a very tiny sprite, but very stubborn and independent lady. She hated the idea of a dog to protect her, and the fact that she's a cat person didn't help. She'd ignore the dog and find reasons to complain about him. Georgie, he knocked over my plant. His paws are everywhere, and so on. One day, my great-grandma was home alone on a quiet autumn day. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and she relaxed by her favourite seat at the phonograph and was repairing seams on clothes. The black lab, which full name was Bull, began to restlessly harass her. He refused to leave her side, despite her shooing him. He would lay down for a moment, sigh, get up to wander. A half an hour went by, and the dog did not stop this. His sighs eventually turned into whines and distressed sounds and loud panting. Lily began to grow uneasy at the dog's behaviour. A mild-mannered creature such as Bull was either happy or hungry. He never seemed miserable up until now. Soon Bull began pacing more frantically. He went from room to room panting and whining. My grandma didn't know what to make of what was happening, and she put down her sewing and struggled to stand, watching the dog. When she stood, Bull came back into the room, pacing in front of her, lying his head and ears back, barking loudly, snarling. The thought of rabies entered her mind, and she grabbed the stool to put between them. Carefully she took steps backwards, going towards the door, keeping the stool between them. The dog was now pacing and barking loudly again. She reached the bay window at the front of the house, and she saw one of her neighbours in the front yard. She waved at him, screaming for help. The neighbour seemed not to hear her. He was staring at his house, but not at a window, and suddenly he took quick steps towards her front door. As quick as she could, my great-grandma struggled to get to the door, all the while screaming for help. Bull was still barking. He quickly ran towards the door, getting on his back legs, growling at the wood. Lily tried to push him away, but he was too big. The neighbour pounds on the locked door. Stricken with terror, she tumbled back into the bay window, contemplating throwing herself out, when she watched a group of men rush onto her lawn towards the door. Thinking that they were there to get her away from the crazy dog, she then watches them wrestle the neighbour, who's on the floor, pinned down. Crying, she opens a window as much as she could, and the dog's going insane. The neighbours pulled her out from the window and helped her onto the porch, explaining they'd seen the man wandering around the yard for over an hour. It was until they watched him charge at the door and pound on it screaming they realised what was going on. While trying the door and pounding on it, he pulled a large kitchen knife from his belt, beginning to stab the door, screaming. He was taken away to the hospital crying about Jesus. It turns out the next door neighbour had cancer of the brain, and he'd gone undiagnosed for a while. It had grown to such a size that he lost his mind. That day in his mind, he had to kill my grandma Lily. If it wasn't for Bull, she might have unlocked the door and saw what he wanted. After that day, she pampered Bull and gave him the best food and would let him sleep on her feet while at her favourite chair. I live in an apartment complex with my husband and a 13-year-old baby in a bad area of my city. Last night my husband was at work and kept hearing strange noises from near my balcony. I turned the porch light on, expecting to see a stranger with a toothy grin and knife in his hand. Instead, I see no one, going back to what I was doing. Again, I heard a strange noise and nervously checked. I don't see anything. I thought to myself that it was just my neighbour outside, and I was probably weirding him out by opening the slide door, turning the lights off and on. So I come back inside, shove some headphones on, and just distracted myself from what was going on. This worked perfectly. I forget all about the noises. Typically, around 9:30 or so, I take a bath. I got caught up in something on the internet though, and I ended up not getting up from my kitchen until 10 PM. Around that time, I arose to bathe. I heard pounding outside the apartment door. I glanced out my apartment's peephole and see no one. I can only see other apartments. I am nosy and decide to wait until I can see a person though. They were really pounding on the door and I was shaken. After probably 8 or so minutes, the pounding stopped. I wait, still no one. The neighbours hadn't answered their door either. The silence continues for maybe 5 more minutes, and after a couple of minutes I walk away. It then begins again. This time though, it sounded like it is on my door. I'm very anxious, and I do not like being alone, and refuse to open the door if I don't absolutely have to. So I cautiously look through the peephole, seeing nothing again. I'm terrified. I messaged my husband and he told me to call our building security. Pounding would go silent, then continue for minutes on end. I stared out my neighbour's peephole, wondering what was going on, as I tried to rationalise what's happening. My thoughts are interrupted though, as someone began to scratch at my door. My apartment door's metal, so I could distinctly hear someone's nails. I glanced through the peephole, terrified at a creature appearing, but again, no one in sight. I then decided that I should go to the closet in my bathroom and call security. Right as I'm about to walk away though, I saw something through the peephole that made me gasp. I see a man slowly stand up. I've never seen him before. I couldn't see him before because the way he's crouched down. I'm pretty sure he was waiting for me to do God knows what. I'm so glad I never opened that door.